Google's AI is harder to escape on Android 16. A potentially promising new VPN that can't log users by design, how the cartels found FBI informants, and more. Welcome to Surveillance Report 232, where we are dedicated to keeping you private and secure with the latest news from the past week. I am Nathan from The New Oil.
And I'm Henry from Techlore.
We have a new sponsor this week, and we're excited to share them with you guys. It is Ente, the photo manager app. A lot of you guys have heard of them, but if you haven't, you should definitely check them out. This is a zero-knowledge, cross-platform photo management app with all the features that you would expect from any given photo manager app, plus a few more. The features you would expect are things like albums. You can geotag your pictures if you want, so that you can use the location metadata to kind of organize them based on location, like if you go on vacation or something. There are opt-in AI features like facial recognition to, again, group photos by who's in them. Also natural language search, so you can type in like forests or cars or whatever, and it'll go find those things. Again, just to be clear, this is opt-in. This is all done on device, and you actually have to opt in per device. So opting in on your phone will not enable it on your computer. They also offer curated memories. You know, on this day, this thing happened 5 years ago. There's phone widgets and hidden folders, which are becoming increasingly popular. The unique features, aside from being encrypted, include being fully open source. They have a blog actually about how to self-host Ente if you prefer. They have duplicate image detection, 3 backup locations in the EU, a family plan, and personally the feature I think is super cool is albums that non-users can add to. So I see it a lot at weddings. People will host a wedding and they'll say, hey, use this hashtag so we can find these photos on Instagram. You don't need to do that. You can just create a link where people can go and drop the photos. Now you have a copy of all those photos from your wedding or your party or whatever. I've been using Ente myself for quite a while. I'm really impressed with it. It's supposed to be a replacement for things like Apple's iCloud or Google's Photos, and I haven't had any issues. It's lived up to everything I've needed from it. There was one time there was a bug with like billing, and I contacted support and they got it squared away in like 24 hours. So really cool stuff. Really excited to have them as a sponsor. And again, if you have not checked them out, definitely check them out. And you can use our link to let them know that we sent you, which is nt.sh/surveillance report. So a quick announcement for patrons. A lot of you guys have probably noticed that I have really been struggling to get the Q&A out in the middle of the week. That might get better. You know, Henry was traveling and that kind of screwed up our usual recording time. Not trying to throw... That was cool.
Yeah, check it out.
Very magnetic.
MagSafe for some Paris matcha, actually, speaking of travel. I spent like 50 euros on this matcha, so it better be good.
Yeah, no kidding. But anyway, so things might get back to normal now that he's back. But then also this week, I was working like literally 12-hour days, like every day this week. So it's not all him. It's not all the schedule. It's also me and my work. So anyways, I just want to get ahead of this because I feel like lately we've been having a lot of weeks where it's like, oh, no Q&A this week. Go ahead from now on and just leave your questions on the most recent post. Within the last week, you know, if you post on something from 6 weeks ago, I can't guarantee I will see it. But if you leave it on like theoretically on a normal week, like the episode and the Q&A, either one of those, the most recent one, I will check both of those. I'll round them all up and we'll include them on the upcoming Q&A. I hope that made sense. But I feel bad that you guys aren't getting enough time to ask your questions. So yeah, just go ahead and leave them on the most recent post. I'll make sure I round them up. And I really apologize that things have been falling behind, but thank you guys for your patience and bearing with us. So our highlight story this week comes from Google. Yet again, we've been talking about Google a lot lately because Android 16, I think, is out. I think my wife actually updated the other day, and I definitely sent her some instructions on how to disable this because Google Gemini is about to control your messages and calls even if you say no. Slightly misleading headline. The actual headline is that it's about to get a lot harder to shut off Google Gemini from doing this kind of thing. Quoting the article, before now, if you disabled Gemini app's activity, the setting that governs what Gemini remembers and uses to train future AI models, you were cut off from deeper integrations. For example, Gemini couldn't place calls or send text messages because it wasn't allowed to access that data. Starting on July 7th, so that should be like the Monday after this comes out, Gemini will gain access to 4 key phone services: phone, messages, WhatsApp, and utilities, which includes things like volume, flashlight, alarm, and media controls, regardless of whether you've turned activity tracking on. Google will not save your assistant requests to your Gemini activity page or use them to train its models if app's activity is disabled, but it will keep the data for up to 72 hours. Google says this temporary window allows for, quote, service reliability and safety checks, unquote. The article goes on to say that Gemini now has a second set of toggles buried deep in the settings menu. So inside the Gemini app, you can go to Profile and then Apps and manually disable access to phone, messages, WhatsApp, or utilities. But these are turned on by default, even if you've disabled tracking in the past. Pretty straightforward story. At first glance, this isn't as bad as it seems, right? Like, they're not going to use it to train anything, and they're only keeping the data for a couple days. But the article points out, it's like, yeah, but that's kind of like getting really fuzzy with the definition of privacy, right? Because if we go to lunch and I say, hey, can I have your fries? And you're like, no, they're mine. If you wanted fries, you should have ordered some. And I'm like, okay, I'll just take a few. The answer was no. Go get your own fries. That's kind of what Google is doing, is when you're like, hey, I don't want to share this data with you. Okay, well, we'll just take it temporarily and then delete it. And it's like, no, I said no. Even if you're not actually doing anything with it, you're playing fast and loose. And this is kind of part of that, what does Shoshana Zuboff call it? Anyways, it's like, it's them encroaching on your privacy, potentially. This could be a slippery slope. This could just be Google being Google and being stupid, but they're kind of potentially slowly edging in there to take a little bit more each time. It's also not cool that this is opt out. That is definitely not surprising, but what's really frustrating is it should be trivial for Google to roll out this update in a way where it checks your existing settings and then sees that it's disabled and says, okay, let's go ahead and disable it. Like, why do I have to disable this twice now? Really not cool, really frustrating. I guess on the topic of the settings, I'll go ahead and point it out that, like, yeah, these companies are notorious for reverting your settings anyways to begin with. So there is the normal advice. If you have a Pixel, you can put a custom OS on it. So far, none of them have rolled out any AI features that I'm aware of, which is great. They tend to remove all this stuff. If you have something other than a Pixel, like you can't put a custom OS on it, or whenever it does get Android 16, definitely make sure to go in there and check on this kind of stuff. Henry and I have talked about AI extensively in the patron version of the podcast, and both of us agree that, like, it's like anything in life. There are use cases where it makes sense, but I don't think either of us are really a fan of the way this is just being relentlessly shoved down everyone's throat, whether we want it or not. And that's definitely one of the problems with, I guess, just society in general, in the sense of, like, corporate speaking, is like these companies are so powerful that they just do whatever they want, and the rest of us are largely powerless to stop it, or at very least, we have to jump through so many hoops to stop it. I feel like I'm going to talk in circles if I keep going, but that's really frustrating. So definitely, I think that's why it's important to do what you can to exercise control and opt out of these things now, because otherwise they just steamroll right through you and do whatever they want. And the next thing you know, you don't have any choice. Like 15, 20 years ago, you didn't need a phone. A phone was cool to have, but you could survive just fine without it. It's becoming increasingly harder to live in modern society without a phone. And I know there's going to be the one hipster in the comments who's like, I have never had a cell phone. Cool, you're the exception. It's unfortunate that it's becoming a world where everything is harder to opt out of and your privacy is put at risk. And we're seeing this play out all over again with AI. They're increasingly shoving it down our throats until we're at a point where we don't have a choice. It's just part of life. And you can either not contribute to society and not be part of society, or you can be that, like, 1% of people that has a unique situation where you're able to opt out of it successfully, or you can just shut up and deal with it. And I don't like the fact that we're not getting that freedom. I think that's a sufficiently good rant for the beginning of the episode.
Yeah, I think defaults just really matter. I was kind of reminded, I was given a phone recently, the Minimal phone. It's literally just called the Minimal phone. It's kind of not the best branding, perhaps. It's a descriptor as the name. Anyway.
But that is kind of the best branding, because then once it picks up enough steam and you Google it, it'll always be the first result.
That's true. So yeah, maybe long term, they're playing it well. It's actually a pretty interesting device, because my biggest complaint, this is going to tie to the story in a sec, I promise. My biggest complaint with Minimal phones in general is that they're a bit too restrictive, because they decide how you should be using your phone. Like, they'll come pre-installed with, like, the 3 things that you can do on the device, but sometimes you don't need one of those things and you need a different thing, but you can't swap it in or out. This phone is just like a black and white screen. It's an e-ink display. It's got a physical keyboard, and it just allows you to install anything you want. But you can kind of use it as a secondary kind of minimal device, and it comes with essentially like O launcher out of the box. Theoretically, you can do this on any Android device, but I think it's actually a much better concept than a lot of these dumb phones that kind of trap you into a corner with what you're able to do on them. But I was setting up this phone, and it runs just, regular Google Play services, stock Android. And I'm just reminded of how much time it takes to go and bury through all these settings. And it was the kind of thing where it's like, there's privacy settings for your Android operating system. You got to go into Google Play services. And some of the settings are inside the settings app. Some of them you have to log into your Google account in the web browser to disable. That it also applies to the Android device, if that makes sense. And then that's not even including individual apps and their own privacy settings. So in my view, what would be really awesome someday this is a bit optimistic. It would be cool if there were very standardized privacy settings that you just enable once or disable once in your settings, and then every app kind of follows that. Apple's kind of somewhat done that with their like transparency feature where like you can opt in or out of tracking. It's a bit limited, but it's something. But it would be cool if that was just a universal thing. So like, oh, use, personalization in your keyboard could be something in your settings, and then every app has to respect it because it has to follow the API. So I think that's a really lost opportunity on these operating systems to really make this privacy stuff simpler for people. But what I really want to say here is that defaults matter. And when you start bearing things under settings, it's going to be really difficult for people who don't even know about this, who aren't listening to this podcast and keeping up with the latest privacy news to actually do anything about it. So you guys listening to this, you're kind of ambassadors for a lot of these stories in a way. So you're listening to this podcast, So if you know anyone in your life, friends, family, who don't know about this stuff, inform them. You can do it via this podcast, or you can just tell them in person and show them how to opt out, or just do it for them. It might take you a few minutes, and then that's all it takes. And that's how you help the people around you. So that's kind of my takeaway. And also to remind you that defaults really matter, because most people are just going to roll with the defaults because they don't keep up with what's going on in the world.
Which I just want to note, because someone's going to say it in the comments. That's the point, and I know you know it, but that's the point, is defaults matter. So the companies make the defaults to benefit them instead of you.
All right. Well, we're going to head into the data breaches here. And Switzerland says government data was stolen in a ransomware attack. So they're informing that sensitive information from various federal offices has been impacted by a ransomware attack by the third-party organization Radix. This is a Zurich-based nonprofit organization dedicated to health promotion. It operates 8 competence centers that carry out projects and services commissioned by the Swiss federal government and municipal authorities and other public and private organizations. Now, they informed impacted individuals via personalized notifications and notes that there's no evidence that sensitive data from partner organizations was affected. It appears to have published a 1.3 terabyte archive on its extortion portal, including several document scans of financial records, contracts, and communications. The data is being offered for free.
Our next data breach is yet another stalkerware app called Cat Watchful, which is spying on thousands of phones. A security vulnerability in a stealthy Android spyware app called Cat Watchful has exposed thousands of its customers, including its admin. The bug spilled the spyware app's full database of email addresses and plain text passwords that customers use to access the data stolen from the phones of their victims. So this is a spyware masquerading as a child monitoring app, like a lot of them do. So this is masquerading as a child monitoring app that claims to be invisible and cannot be detected, all while uploading the victim's phone's private contents to a dashboard viewable by the person who planted the app. The stolen data includes the victim's photos, messages, and real-time location. The app can also remotely tap into the live ambient audio from the person's microphone and access both front and rear phone cameras. This app is the latest example in a growing list of stalkerware operations that have been hacked, breached, or otherwise exposed the data they obtain, and is at least the 5th spyware operation this year to have experienced a data spill. According to a copy of the database from early June, Cat Watchful had email addresses and passwords on more than 62,000 customers and the phone data from 26,000 victim devices. Most of the compromised devices were located in Mexico, Colombia, India, Peru, Argentina, Ecuador, and Bolivia in order of number of victims. Some of the records date back to 2018. Without any clear indication that the admin will disclose the incident, TechCrunch has provided a copy of the database to Have I Been Pwned. A personal note on this one is, if you guys have the time, you should absolutely read this article, because it kind of gets worse as they go, and there are also instructions on how to remove it if you believe that you may have been impacted.
Hacker with political agenda stole data from Colombia, is what the university said. So it's unclear how long the hacker was in university systems, but a Colombia spokesperson said there have been no threat activity detected since June 24th. So last week, the school said it was investigating the cyber attack, and the website and other systems were intermittently offline. The university has not received a demand for money or seen any indication of ransomware. So the hacker provided Bloomberg News with 1.6 gigabytes of data they claim to have stolen from the university, including information from 2.5 million applications going back decades. The stolen data the outlet received reportedly contains details on whether applicants were rejected or accepted, their citizenship status, their university ID numbers, which academic program they sought admission to. Now, they also said that they obtained 460 gigabytes of data in total after spending 2 months targeting and penetrating increasingly privileged layers of the university's servers, and said he harvested information about financial aid packages, employee pay, and at least 1.8 million social security numbers belonging to employees, applicants, students, and their family members. While the hacker's claims have not been independently verified, they said it compared data provided by the hacker to that belonging to Columbia applicants seeking admission between 2019 and 2024 and did confirm that they matched. So it seems to at least be partially legit, if not completely legit. The actor told Bloomberg he was seeking information that would indicate whether the university continues to use affirmative action in admissions despite a 2023 Supreme Court decision prohibiting the practice.
And the last one we're going to highlight, I just kind of wanted to signal boost this one because it's interesting. I mean, I guess scams in general are not really new, but I just felt like this was a kind of a be on the lookout for this sort of thing. So the headline says, criminals steal health data posing as fraud investigators. Quoting the article, scammers posing as legitimate health insurers and their investigative team members are emailing or messaging potential victims to pressure them into providing personal or health data that can later be used for fraudulent purposes. The messages are designed to pressure victims into disclosing protected health information, medical records, personal financial details, or providing reimbursements for alleged service overpayments or non-covered services. The FBI also shared several tips to help protect against fraudulent attempts, advising Americans to be cautious of unsolicited emails, texts, and calls that request personal information, and never to click links contained in such suspicious messages. Additionally, it recommends using strong passwords and enabling multi-factor authentication for all accounts. And before sharing any personal or healthcare information, individuals should also contact their health insurance provider directly to verify the legitimacy of any messages they receive.
Johnson Controls starts notifying people affected by 2023 data breach. We're going to keep these quick. After becoming aware of the incident, they notified law enforcement and publicly disclosed the incident in filings on September 27, 2023, November 13, 2023, and December 14, 2023. We're just hearing about it now, and they're just notifying people about this. And this affected control systems, security equipment, HVAC, and fire safety equipment for buildings. So read more in the description.
SE Health, and that's ESSE, SESA Health, says recent data breach affects over 263,000 patients. This is the largest independent physicians group in the greater St. Louis area, with 50 locations and over 100 physicians. This occurred April 21st and stole a wide range of sensitive data for each patient, including personal information like name, address, date of birth, health info, medical record number, patient number, and, quote, some health information. They stated that there's no evidence that social security numbers were taken and the electronic medical record system was not breached.
Kelly Benefits, this is a provider of benefits consulting, enrollment technology, payroll, etc., business stuff. They had a data breach in 2024, which impacted over 500,000 customers. This included a lot of other people as well, like United Healthcare, CareFirst, Blue Cross, Blue Shield, etc. The breach notice that was sent to impacted individuals yesterday informs of what was included, which includes pretty much everything about you, to be honest. So if you did get that notice and you want to learn more, we'll leave it down in the show notes.
Qantas, I don't know how that's pronounced, QANTAS. Their hack resulted in the theft of 6 million passengers' personal data. So this is an airline. And they said a cybercriminal targeted one of its call centers on June 30th, stole data from the systems, including names, email address, phone numbers, dates of birth, and frequent flyer numbers.
And in the last data breach this week, Idea Lab confirms data stolen in the ransomware attack last year. So they started 150 companies over because they're VCs. This occurred in October of 2024. It includes essentially former employees and current and former support service contractors, their dependents, etc. So if you are familiar with Idea Labs or involved with them in any way, check out the show notes to learn more.
All right, with that, we'll go into the companies. And we already talked about Android this week. So our next big company story will come from Tinder, who is requiring new users in California to use facial recognition tech to verify their profiles. So the new face check feature aims to reduce impersonation on the dating app and ensure that people are not being connected to bots or fake accounts. Face check requires users to take a short video selfie when they're signing up for the app. The scan confirms that the person is real, checks if their face matches their profile photos, and also detects if the same face is being used across multiple accounts. The user will receive a photo-verified badge on their profile if they pass. Tinder said it will then delete the selfie video but store an encrypted face map to help spot duplicate profiles in the future. FaceCheck is already used in Colombia and Canada, and it's worth noting that this is different from ID Check, which is used to verify age and identity using a government-issued ID.
So getting back on topic, patrons got a whole dating lesson here from us and our thoughts on loneliness. So join the patron version if you want more of that. But AT&T has rolled out wireless lock feature to block SIM swap attacks. The new feature has been available for some customers for almost a year and has now been rolled out to all AT&T customers. With this new feature, customers can log into a company's mobile app or website to lock their number, which prevents anyone, including AT&T employees, from porting the number to a new SIM card or transferring it to another provider unless the setting is disabled. The feature also protects other types of information like changing billing information, authorized users, and changing phone numbers. Business accounts receive additional features like the ability to exempt certain lines from the lock or restrict specific account changes when enabled. Yeah, and then here's the direct quote from the author. While it is good to see that AT&T has finally released this feature, it comes late as other carriers like Verizon have had it for almost 5 years.
All right, and our last company story probably doesn't apply to most of us, but it's still pretty interesting and I guess worth knowing. Let's Encrypt is rolling out free security certificates for IP addresses. The article says they are not the first CA or certificate authority to do so. Positive SSL, Sectigo, and GeoTrust all offer TLS certificates for use with IP addresses at prices ranging from $40 to $90 or so annually. But Let's Encrypt does so at no cost. For those with a static IP address who want to host a website, an IP address certificate provides a way to offer visitors a secure connection with that numeric identifier while avoiding the nominal expense of a domain name. So if you're like me, my first question was why? And the article kind of points out, like, for most people, this doesn't really make sense for a lot of reasons. Like, IP addresses can change. If you use an actual domain name, then you can move stuff around and users don't have to learn a new web address. They do kind of make that argument, but they do go on to say that, if you still insist for whatever reason, they say there are actually a few reasons where it makes sense. IP certificates have been a requested feature since at least 2017, and Aaron Gable, who is the principal engineer at Let's Encrypt, sees several potential scenarios where an IP address certificate might be warranted. First, a hosting provider might want one to provide a default landing page in case someone types the company's IP into a browser, as Cloudflare has done with 1.1.1.1, which I mentioned earlier, and Google has 8888. Or a web publisher might want to provide a way to connect securely to a website without paying for a domain name. So if it's something internal, maybe like a home NOS or something that you're putting on the web for whatever reason, this could be a way to keep costs down. Gable also suggests that servers supporting the hypersecure DNS over HTTPS protocol might benefit from an IP address certificate, and other potential uses include providing secure remote access to certain home devices like network-attached storage servers, which they do know is already doable with things like WireGuard or Tailscale, and securing short-lived connections for server administration or interconnection, which, on that note, Let's Encrypt limits the lifespan of its IP address certificates to 6 days, a period it adopted for other short-lived certificates earlier this year as a security measure. So, according to Gable, IP address certificates are now available in Let's Encrypt's staging environment and will become generally available later this year.
And now we're going to dive into research. So there's a Bluetooth flaw that lets hackers spy through your microphone. So researchers confirmed that 29 devices from Biodynamic, Bose, Sony, Marshall, Jabra, JBL, JLab, Iris, Max, Mower Labs, Tufil are affected. The list of impacted products includes speakers, earbuds, headphones, and wireless mics. The security problem could be leveraged to take over one of these vulnerable products, and on some phones, an attacker within connection range may be able to extract call history and contacts. Now, the issues are not critical, and besides close physical proximity, their exploitation also requires a high technical skill set. While such an attack may not present a great risk, other scenarios leveraging the 3 bugs could let a threat actor hijack the connection between the mobile phone and an audio Bluetooth device and use the Bluetooth hands-free profile, HFP, to issue commands to the phone. The researchers were able to trigger a call to an arbitrary number by extracting the Bluetooth link key from a vulnerable device's memory. They were also able to initiate a call and successfully eavesdrop on conversations or sounds within earshot of the phone. The necessity of both technical sophistication and physical proximity confines these attacks to really high-value targets, like those in diplomacy, journalism, activism, or sensitive industries. Now, the chip maker, Aroha, has released an updated SDK incorporating necessary mitigations, and device manufacturers have started patch development and distribution. Nevertheless, German publication Heiss says that the most recent firmware updates for more than half of the affected devices are from May 27th or earlier, which is before Aroha delivered the updated SDK to its customers.
That was our only research story, so we're going to go ahead and hop into politics. Google was hit with a $314 million US verdict in a cellular data class action. So the plaintiffs filed the class action in state court in 2019 on behalf of an estimated 14 million Californians. They argued that Google collected information from idle phones running its Android operating system for company uses like targeted advertising, consuming Android users' cell data at their expense. Google told the court that no Android users were harmed by the data transfers and that users consented to them in the company's terms of service and privacy policies. Google spokesperson Jose Castaneda said in a statement that the company would appeal and that the verdict, quote, misunderstands services that are critical to the security, performance, and reliability of Android devices, unquote. Another group filed a separate lawsuit in federal court in San Jose, bringing the same claims against Google on behalf of Android users in the other 49 states. That case is scheduled for trial in April of 2026.
This next story is titled China's Giant New Gamble with Digital IDs. So they are going to launch digital IDs for internet use on July 15th, transferring online verification from private companies to government control. Users obtain digital IDs by submitting personal information, including facial scans, to police via an app. A pilot program launched a year ago, and it enrolled 6 million people. The system currently remains voluntary, though officials and state media are pushing citizens to register for, quote, information security. Companies will see only anonymized character strings when users log in, while police retain exclusive access to personal details. The program replaces China's existing system requiring citizens to register with companies using real names before posting comments, gaming, or making purchases. Police say they punished 47,000 people last year for spreading rumors online, and the digital ID serves a broader government strategy to centralize data control. State planners classify data as a production factor alongside labor and capital, aiming to extract information from private companies for trading through government-operated data exchanges.
That'll take us into the free and open source software section. And this first one is just a quick shout out from Tuda. On July 9th through 15th, they are going to be launching 50% off. If you're a Tuda user or you're thinking about it or you're thinking about upgrading your plan or whatever, this applies to you too. As far as I know, this is not limited to companies. So go ahead and score yourself a sweet discount. I will also be posting about that on the New Oil's newsfeed in case you're worried you may forget. The link, I'll put it in the show notes, but it's tuda.com/go-European.
Next one is from Tuda's competitor, Proton, who has joined a suit against Apple for predatory practices that harm developers and consumers. This has been going on for quite a while. The privacy-specific part is Apple's App Store policies disproportionately favor the surveillance capitalism business model employed by companies like Meta and Google, and therefore entrench an online business model that routinely violates consumers' personal privacy. All developers are required to pay Apple an annual fee of $99 to be in the App Store, but Apple also takes a 30% cut from payments made through iOS apps, which are forced to use Apple's payment system. Companies that monetize user data in exchange for free services that abuse your privacy aren't affected by this, as they don't process payments through the App Store. However, privacy-first companies that monetize through subscriptions are disproportionately hit by this fee, putting a major barrier towards the adoption of privacy-first business models. Naturally, these are also the very companies Apple is directly competing with through its disingenuous privacy marketing campaigns. This is a significant driver behind the internet's descent into widespread surveillance capitalism.
This next story, we're going to keep it pretty brief. It's just one of those stories that's been making the rounds. The headline says, new VPN service can't log users by design. So this is a VPN service called VPN.net. And basically, they leverage the Intel Software Guard Extension, or SGX, which is private areas of memory that essentially act as a secure black box, and not even the operators of the service can see what's happening inside. The system within the SGX enclave is reportedly built to map user identities to temporary anonymous tokens. This means the part of the system that knows that user X is connected is structurally walled off from the part that knows someone is accessing website Y. They say that they do have access to unlinked details like payment info and email addresses, but not your traffic. So the article does note there are some concerns. The founder is Andrew Lee, who was originally the founder of PIA, Private Internet Access, which sold to Cape, which is a VPN conglomerate that has some questionable practices in the industry. The company also lists, quote, contentious Bitcoin veterans Roger Ver and Mike Carpeles on their team, who have both had their legal issues in the past. So just to kind of be fully transparent about that. But it is open source, and they say that you can also do remote attestation to ensure that the code running on the servers is the same code as the source code. And there are also notes that Intel SGX is itself a physical product that is part of the CPU, which relies on the firmware. So there's vulnerabilities there. There's concerns about vendor lock-in. So I'm not trying to downplay this thing. I'm just trying to shorten all of this stuff instead of reading it verbatim like we usually do. The very last FOSS story, I'll take it because it's literally like 2 seconds. Basically, Graphene OS has released their first builds based on Android 16. So I think we're probably going to stop talking about Android 16 and custom ROMs after this unless something significant happens. But so far, it seems that I think we kind of predicted this would happen. At least we hoped this would happen. Is so far, it does seem like custom OS developers are going to continue to support Android 16, and they're going to continue to port it to more private and secure OSs like Graphene, like Calyx, like Lineage. It's just going to be a lot slower.
And now we're going to have Misfits. Sinaloa cartel used phone data and surveillance cameras to find FBI informants. This is from the DOJ. So this is a hacker working for the Sinaloa drug cartel that's from Mexico. And they were able to obtain an FBI official's phone records and use Mexico City surveillance cameras to track and kill the agency's informants in 2018. They were able to obtain an assistant from the US Embassy, and they got the phone number to obtain calls made and received, as well as geolocation data. They also used Mexico City's camera system to follow the FBI official through the city and identify people the official met with. The report said that recent technological advances have made it easier than ever for less sophisticated nations and criminal enterprises to identify and exploit vulnerabilities in the global surveillance economy. It said the FBI had a strategic plan in the works for mitigating those vulnerabilities and made several recommendations, including more training for Bureau personnel.
And our last story this week is just kind of a weird one. Hunters International ransomware shuts down and releases free decryptors. So the ransomware as a service operation announced that they are officially closing down their operations and will offer free decryptors to help victims recover their data without paying a ransom. And this is a statement from them. After careful consideration and in light of recent developments, we have decided to close the Hunters International project. This decision was not made lightly, and we recognize the impact it has on the organizations we have interacted with. As a gesture of goodwill and to assist those affected by our previous activities, we are offering free decryption software to all companies that have been impacted by our ransomware. Our goal is to ensure that you can recover your encrypted data without the burden of paying ransoms. Unquote. So the threat actors also removed all entries from the extortion panel and added that the companies whose systems were encrypted in their ransomware attacks can request decryption tools and recovery guidance on the gang's official website. The article says, while the ransomware group doesn't explain what, quote, recent developments it refers to, today's announcement follows a November 17th statement saying that Hunters International will soon shut down because of increased law enforcement scrutiny and declining profitability. Threat intelligence firm Group IB also revealed in April that Hunters International was rebranding with plans to focus on data theft and extortion-only attacks, and had launched a new extortion-only operation known as WorldLeaks. And that's all the news we had this week. So Google is making their AI a little bit harder to escape on Android 16. Make sure that you let your friends and family know, especially if you know any Android users. A potentially promising new VPN that cannot log users by design. Again, we'll keep you updated as we learn more. We'll keep an eye on this project and how the cartels found FBI informants and many, many more stories. It was a little bit more chill of a week, but still plenty to discuss. Like Henry is about to discuss our sponsor, Ente.
Yeah, Ente is a really cool service. Very excited to have them as a new sponsor. For those who haven't heard of them before, they're a zero knowledge, which means everything's end-to-end encrypted, cross-platform photo management app. When I explain it to people in real life, it's like this is Google Photos, Apple Photos, but open source and also end-to-end encrypted. So what you can kind of find in there is very similar features like albums, geotagging, which is opt-in, AI features like facial recognition, which is done on device, natural language search, which is also on device and must be opted in per device, so you can search for things like tree, cat, etc. Curated memories, phone widgets, and hidden folders. So a lot of really neat features, and they just released some cool updates recently as well. Now, besides encryption, Nate mentioned that you can do albums that non-users can add, so which is great for like shared groups, events, and it means that you're not trapped into any ecosystem. So, you know, you can have Ente, your friend can use something else, and you can still send them a public link and they can still upload photos to it, which is much nicer than some of the stuff that Google Photos and Apple Photos do, which makes it a little more trapped in. And on that note, something I really like about Ente is that it's open source and you can get it from really any app store out there. For the most part, you can get it from GitHub, you can install the APK, it's available on Linux, I believe, as well. You're not trapped like with Apple Photos, you have to pretty much only use an iPhone or a MacBook or an iPad. But with Ente, you can freely move between devices and you still have all your photos with all the features that you expect. And if you're really hardcore, you can even self-host it. So that's a lot of great stuff there. And they have 3 backup locations in the EU. They have a family plan. And overall, the prices are very affordable, and what you're paying for is a good premium privacy and security respecting service that doesn't sell you out. So that's really the selling point there. So we want to thank Ente for sponsoring this podcast. Check them out down in the description at ente.sh/surveillance support. Thank you guys, and also check them out and get started. They even have a free plan if you're unsure if it would work for you. So check them out.
That's everything. Thank you guys for listening to Surveillance Report. Links to all the stories can be found in the show notes as always. And if you have a story you think we should cover, please send it to news@surveillancereport.tech. The final thing we want to ask of you is to share the podcast around. Make sure you're subscribed. Give us a rating if you're listening on a platform where that's an option. We're trying to reach as many people as possible with the message of privacy, and every little comment, like, subscribe, thumbs, all of that stuff helps, tell the algorithm that this is stuff people want to see and spreads it around. So thank you again for listening, and we'll be back with more news next week.